today is to talk about this process of fertilization. So it's the best I can do. I think, I'm not sure can you see from there, sort of? All right. Let me know if you can't see and I can move around a little bit. First of all, what we're going to talk about primarily is ovulation and how the sperm finds the egg that came out of the ovary. So we know that here is the ovary, that it is connected by a ligament called this is the proper ligament from ovary to uterus, and then from ovary all the way up to extending to L3. That's one of the reasons why we'd like to pay attention to L3 as well. So we're also aware that this all begins in this big management office called the hypothalamus. Hypothalamus in your brain is the controller up there, the president of the company, if you will, who then has to talk to the manager, who is the anterior pituitary up there in your brain. And in the female brain, the hypothalamus will send a message to the anterior pituitary to produce two hormones: follicle stimulating, which means to stimulate follicles in the ovary to start to produce follicle stimulating hormone, and luteinizing hormone, LH. And luteinizing is the last phase of the ovarian cycle after the egg has been released. So we need to have this period of time where estrogen is being released. Follicle stimulating hormone happens under the effect of estrogen, and there you see the estrogen line in green. It builds and builds, and what is happening here, there are three things happening. The egg is maturing, the lining is building and maturing, and the hormones are dancing with each other. So the follicle stimulating hormone is talking to the ovary, sending message to the ovary that it's time, once again, 13 times in one annual cycle, 13 times in an annual cycle, which is why many ancient cultures believe that there really are 13 moons in a year, and there should be 13 months, and there should be 13 constellations in the zodiac. So the follicle stimulating hormone tells the ovary it's time now. Here on day 1, you see the estrogen is at a normal level. We're feeling pretty balanced, and then under the influence of estrogen, the follicle begins to grow and to grow. So this to me is the bride's chamber. She is being prepared. Here they're fixing her hair, putting on her makeup, getting out her shoes, polishing everything up, fixing her dress, making sure she's got a comfortable bra. All of this is going on here. And while this is happening here, also the estrogen is building and building so it can build the lining of the uterus. So these little, what are called spiral arteries, are being created because of estrogen. Estrogen is the cell proliferating agent. Cell proliferating agent. And if there is enough cholesterol in the bloodstream, your body will produce the right amount of estrogen and progesterone to make this female cycle happen. Now, one of the benefits of being a woman is that our bodies will scour the arteries to pick up the cholesterol to use to make hormones, to make estrogen and to make progesterone. And that is why, as we age and after menopause, we get big breasts and bigger bellies than we're accustomed to having, because the fat is there so that your body can draw on that cholesterol fat to produce the hormones. Without fat, the body cannot produce hormone, which is why skinny women who refuse to gain any weight whatsoever have a very hard time, sometimes are completely anovulatory. There's just not enough fat. And that's one of the issues with low-fat foods. And since low-fat foods came on the market and it became such a fad to protect the heart, right? Well, then a lot more people showed up with fertility challenges due to insufficient cholesterol. If you ever have time to look at the molecular makeup of hormones next to cholesterol, you see they look like twins. Plus one little dangle thing on that molecule. One little dangle thing makes estrogen and progesterone different than cholesterol. Pretty amazing, right? Yeah. And one benefit we have, why women have less heart attacks than men, because our bodies scour our arteries to pick up the cholesterol and use it for hormone production. So, what's happening then? We're moving along. The bride is in her chamber, getting ready. And so coming along, the arteries are building on the uterine wall right here. Thank you for the red. That's very nice. And then as we come close to we're talking about a 30-day cycle. I just chose 30 days randomly. You know, it could be anywhere from 26 to 35. And for some reason, I had many women in my practice with 35-day cycles. Anybody else find that? Yeah, it's not abnormal at all to have a 35-day cycle. So the norm is anywhere from 28, sometimes 26 to 35. So if you have a woman with a 35-day cycle, that may just be her, probably her sister and her mother as well. Most of us are 28 to 30-day cycles. I was always a 30-day cycle. So we're moving along to day 16. On day 16, luteinizing hormone comes out of the anterior pituitary and then causes the progesterone to reach a peak. Once progesterone reaches a peak, it signals the ovary here to let out that egg. And then you know that once the temperature peaks, so here at the time of ovulation, the cervix is soft, it's lifted high, and that's why we need good ligaments. You have to lift the whole body of the uterus up so that it can receive the sperm as it comes into the vagina. It has to be soft, has to be high by grace of the ligaments. It has to be open so that the sperm can find its way in. And of course, it has to be wet. And all of this estrogen buildup is also creating cervical fluid, cell proliferating agent. It's doing so much. It's growing this egg in the ovary. It's growing the membrane of the uterus, and it's also growing rich cervical fluid that contains so much. So there we are, getting ready. The bride comes out of the egg. This is a really big key here, where we are at day 16 and ovulation occurs, if so many things are in place. One thing has to be in place is an enzyme has to be created within the ovary itself to crack its own egg and let that ovum out. And that's called plasmin, Plasmin, plasmin. That is the issue with PCOS. Women are producing insufficient amounts of this plasmin enzyme in order to digest the wall of the ovary to let the mature ovum out. Once it cracks through the wall of the ovary, it's just thrown out into the liquid, into the fluid surrounding all of the ovary, the fallopian tube, all of the area around that in the pelvic floor, which is why women say they get bloated. What can you give me for this bloating around this time of the month? Nothing. That bloating is necessary because once the egg comes out, it floats it floats, and it has to have a fluid to float. And then the fallopian tube, with the grace of all of the ligaments of the uterus, reach around, actually move around like this and search for that egg that's floating in this fluid. And with the fluid that is surrounding the area of the pelvic floor, it sucks it into the fallopian tube. But it can't do it without a good amount of water in that part of the body, which is why we get bloated. It's a natural process of ovulation. So when they tell you, what can you give me for this bloating? Nothing. Just it lasts like 3 or 4 days, and that's all. Then it's over. Once ovulation occurs, then that bloating is no longer necessary because the fallopian tube has drawn around. And remember, if this ovary produces an egg and this fallopian tube is blocked or sealed up with adhesions and scar tissue, this fallopian tube can do this. Come, and suck it up, pull it in, and then bring it into the uterus. So then, once that happens, once it's out, the fallopian tube reaches around and sucks it up, and then in here it is complete of its nutrient base. All of the things that it needs are produced here, actually produced in the fallopian tube, and the little egg is drawn along by cilia moving in this direction, going from here into here, and your fallopian tubes keep doing this. Always reminds me of the belly dancers. Both arms going gracefully at the same time. Always think of the fallopian tube as the arms of a belly dancer. So into the fallopian tube it goes, and here it waits, some say 5, some say 7 days. Now, of course, we mate. Now here comes the groom. The bride is out of her chamber. The doors have been opened. She's floated along the sea, and some gracious sea creature came along, sucked her up into the right hallway. So here she is getting her veil, getting whatever, her flowers. Here she's getting her veil and her flowers. Here comes the groom in the sperm. Now at this point, he has to stop in the vestibule. Now he's practically naked when he comes there to the church. And here at the cervical fluid, he picks up his calcium, his potassium, his iron, copper, zinc, glucose, amino acids, proteins, fatty acids, selenium, amylase, and prostaglandin. Prostaglandin is what gives him the energy to move. Of course, there are about 100 million of them standing at the gates, hoping to make that one connection. About 100 million. And if there are less than 100 million, they don't have enough power to make it up. So that's why do they need 100 million? Because altogether they flagellate. And that flagellation gives them the power to move. They have to move up, right? And then the uterus also lifts. As the sperm enters the vagina, the uterus lifts itself, and I've seen videos, actual movies, of the cervix doing this, looking for where that sperm is and drawing it in as well. And these are all the things happening within us while we're enjoying sexual connection with the guy, right? All this is going on and we're completely aware of it. To me, this inner working is like truly the temple of the goddess. I don't know any other way to describe it. And this is where creation occurs over and over and over again in our bodies. So here the groom gets his hat, he gets his ring, he gets a boutonniere, he gets on shoes, and he gets a vehicle. And he gets gas. Because the vehicle is actually the calcium and the gas is the prostaglandin. So without this cervical fluid, he cannot move forward. I mean, this to me has always made me feel like such It's a perfect example of cooperation, whereas for the male sperm, it's a perfect example of competition. There are 100 million grooms standing in line as hopefuls, as the bachelor of the month, right? Who's going to be chosen? So the sperm enters in here and it gets all the groom gets everything that he needs, and then he makes his way up, 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 and he has to get all the way in here to meet that egg. Now, the magic part, when the groom, he's got everything he needs because she gave it to him. Does that sound familiar? Literally, he has everything he needs because she gave it to him. And without that, he is not potent. Without that, he cannot reproduce. So now when he gets here, to me, the most magical moment is when the male factor, the groom, makes his way up here to the altar where he meets the bride. She chooses who she will let in. And this is the wisdom, this is the soul of the goddess right here, because the woman's egg actually chooses which sperm she's going to let in. It is not random. She checks on all the little heads, and she checks on all of their chemistry. And I imagine I'm getting chills right now, so I imagine somewhere in there she knows the Akashic records of the human being that is going to be created. And here the goddess creates the universe for us, decides how many women in this generation will be born, how many men will be born, how many geniuses, how many healers, how many doctors, nurses, what is it that the world needs? And right here, she knows what the world needs in this generation and who will be allowed to reincarnate. It's truly, truly something to contemplate, that it is within our power to truly create the next generation, and more so than just bodies, in their minds and in their souls as well. And which is why I really do think it is beneficial for humanity that while we are ovulating, if we are in those reproductive years, that we should do that conscious conception. My friend wrote that beautiful book, Conscious Conception, and it is about being in a state of light, being in a state of prayer, asking for the best possible human being to come through you for the benefit of that family, for you as a mother, for that neighborhood, that generation, and all those that will be in contact with that human being for the rest of their lives. So it is something that we can consciously contribute to, probably not control, because I believe the Lord of the universe chooses in the end, right? But still, we do have the Lord and Goddess of the universe right here are choosing who is going to be reincarnated in this next cycle. So once that occurs right here, they sit here together thinking about building a house, how many kids we're going to have, all that the bride and groom do. And then the amazing thing to me is that as the egg came out, the fallopian tube carried it this way. And it's drawing in the egg with fluid, and here it's drawing in the sperm with fluid. And so here they sit for a period of time while they multiply their wishes, and then she has to roll down again and find a comfortable soft spot to settle in right on the uterine membrane. And then there's another protein necessary right there, because the egg has to break through the uterine wall where all of these arteries are. So she burrows in a soft, warm spot here, and then there's another enzyme here that allows it to begin breaking through this and then start the growth of the placenta. It's really, really complicated, and to think that most people get pregnant without a single thought, even if you don't want to. In my time, all we ever thought about was not getting pregnant. Now we find about 1 in every 4 couples in the world are having a hard time conceiving. So your job as an abdominal therapist and helping women understand what their cycle is all about, how they can contribute to helping the cycle continue normally, is an important factor of our work as well. And explaining this process and then having the menstrual chart so that they know on the day that their luteinizing hormone, the LH, rose up, their temperature rose up, that signals ovulation. And then if it was a successful conception, the luteinizing hormone, this red line, will stay high for at least 18 days. If it drops down on the 12th day, if the progesterone level drops down, the temperature drops down on the 12th day, that's a very good indication of low progesterone. And why that would be, there are multiple factors. Right in our time, the most common factor is the amount of xenoestrogens in our water supply and our food supply. So that what happens is that there are so many powerful estrogens, and those xenoforeign estrogens are 1,000 times stronger than our own estradiol, 1,000 times stronger. And so very often there is just insufficient energy in the ovary to produce so much progesterone. Say our estrogen, like it's dancing like this is estrogen, this is progesterone. The beginning of the cycle, estrogen is doing this, building up the uterine wall, getting the cervical fluid ready, and then along comes progesterone. And it has to reach a level where it's above the amount of estrogen. Otherwise, we cannot maintain the uterine lining and it falls off. But if our system is loaded with this much estrogen to begin with, how is this ever going to get up above that estrogen to cause it to begin to decrease while the progesterone can be in dominance? That's one of the primary reasons. We even see it with insects. A lot of the poisons that they spray on bugs are high in estrogen. Why? Blow your mind. So the next generation does not produce. I couldn't believe that when I read it. And first I heard it, then I started researching it. But the pesticides are high in estrogen. And that's so that the next generation doesn't produce. So what does that do to human beings? It is also preventing reproduction in human beings as well because of the high estrogen levels, where it's just too much for a human body to overcome that level, even though it's not biological estrogen. It's artificial estrogen, but it still triggers and tricks the hypothalamus and the anterior pituitary to think that there is so much estrogen in the system. I can't produce that much progesterone. It's saying it's impossible. I can't. There won't be a complete ovarian cycle. So there's my bride and groom story. The bride is here. Here comes the groom. They meet here at the altar where they talk about their plans, and they have a lovemaking session, and then they float down together, and here they start building their first home. And then 9 months later, we give birth to one more human being and send it out. I always feel like in some ways we send them out like little Moses in the boat. Especially the day you send them off to school. That's exactly how I felt sending my kids to school on their first day, like the woman who put Moses in a boat and sent him down the river to end up wherever he ended up. Okay, comments?